Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artist Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more.
Need a little clapper.
Yeah, I have one of those someplace.
Oh, do you?
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast, brought to you by the South Coast Artists Index. And today we have another incredibly interesting guest. And guest. It's almost like, what's your line? Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Roger Andrews. I am a commercial artist, illustrator, graphic designer, and as I'm fond of saying in my YouTube channel, content creator. That's my claim to fame.
It's all about content, isn't it?
It absolutely is, especially in this environment.
Yeah. And whose content is better than the next person's content?
Right.
The first thing about with your name that interested me is, are you from around here?
I am actually. I was born and raised in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Okay. How many chefs are in your family?
How many chefs? Huh.
Yeah, because all
not
the
too
Andrews
many.
I've ever known were all chefs.
Oh, really? Okay. Well,
Really? Yeah.
the Andrew side of my family are all from the Cape, like
Yeah.
Plymouth, Carver, that area.
Wareham,
Um,
yeah.
Yep, Wareham and Marion.
Uh,
That's my like a big bulk of the Andrew side of my family are from that part of the state.
The berry pickers, basically. A lot of the Cape Verdeans who went out there to work in the cranberry bogs.
Yeah, boggers.
Yeah, the bogs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now Andrews. The name was changed from Andre or something like that, right? I'm assuming.
Probably. I mean, I know for a fact. I mean, my grandmother actually. So my mother's side of the family, they're Andrade, which is interesting, right? So I've got the Andrews, the Americanized version, on one side, and I've got the Andrade, the more Portuguese Cape
That's
Verdean
right.
version on the
Yeah,
other.
that's right. Andrade and Andrews. That's right. Yeah, there's because there are so many names that got changed over because a lot of immigrants, because I know it happened. Well, with the French, they have what they call the D names. It's like said as. So my family name is really Le Forestier, D Fortier. So even though it's that name that they chose, I don't know why. Maybe because it was shorter.
Yeah, probably that's exactly it. Someone writing it in a little form online on a form in Ellis Island decided to switch it up.
Yeah.
Right?
And then, like a lot of the Portuguese, like, the name Brown, and you're like, Brown? What kind of a Portuguese name is that? It was probably Castanho, or there's just so many variations. And usually at the beginning of the show, I always ask people about their names, and I ask them to spell it because there's always a story in there somewhere, even when you think there isn't one. And now, do you ever get any weird things with your name?
No, it's funny. I'm also a junior, so I'm Roger Louis Andrews Jr.
Uh-huh.
And so every now and then, my father's passed away many years ago, but I mean, there was a lot of sort of like, which Roger Andrews are you? For a while. Then
Yeah.
he passed, and then I took ownership, but and I still use my junior every now and then just to kind of differentiate.
Right.
But yeah, no, not really. I mean, to be honest with you, like name hasn't really been an issue or even something that is like I could promote. If I had maybe a more interesting name than Roger Andrews, perhaps there would be better storytelling opportunities or avenues from that.
Well, it's funny because when I Googled you, because I always, like doing that, and I think it was Roger Andrews Illustrator. I mean, you blew up the page.
Wow. That's good.
On the image, the Google images, you really blew it up. So that was kind of interesting. And then there's always too, it's always interesting to see your namesakes, who are other people with the same
Right.
names, and so
Yeah.
forth. And
Did you find anyone of note? Any other
uh,
Roger Andrews around the
yeah,
world?
there is another artist named Roger Andrews who's actually a sculptor,
Oh,
pretty classical, a classical sculptor. Yeah.
right.
Um, in my case, there's a Ron Fortier who is a graphic artist, graphic novelist. He's the creator of the Green Hornet,
Oh,
and he's like really big into the comics and such. I'd love to be able to speak with him.
oh,
I'm waiting to reach out to him. Hopefully, he's let's see, he was 47. He's 5 years older than I am.
okay.
So, uh, he's made quite the name for himself out there. So you just never know. Um, when did you get the bug? When did you know that, yeah, this is what I want to do, and this is all I ever want to do?
Yeah,
Because
this art thing.
this art thing, yeah,
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 the art. Yeah, that. I'll take that virus any day over the current one. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. No. I mean, a little kid. I probably have this classic story. Everyone who gets into art and is identified as someone who has potential as an artist. I mean, I was like 4 or 5 years old. Preschool, kindergarten, and the first thing I ever remember drawing that someone recognized was Spider-Man. I remember I just have this distinct recollection of like my kindergarten teacher or my preschool teacher saying, "Wow, that actually looks like Spider-Man." I remember that like really distinctly. And so from that point on, I mean, the fuse was lit. I mean, I was drawing comic book characters, collecting and buying. My grandmother used to take me to the little. Remember when you used to buy comic books in the drugstore?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so
Those
yeah,
spin
little
around, right?
spinner. Yeah, the spinner rack. Yeah. And
Yeah,
she would
yeah,
take me and she would allow me to select that, comic books at the time were like 30, 40 cents, at the
yeah.
time, maybe 70 cents at the max when I was a kid. And so I'd spin that rack and get 4 or 5 issues and I would just be inspired. I would draw from that. And that's when people really started to identify me as being that kid in class who could draw. There's at least one or two in every class who could draw. And that was me
Yeah.
growing up.
Did you ever get in trouble in class?
Never. You know what I used to do? This is crazy.
Man,
Yeah, never.
I got
Did you?
busted so many times. Yeah.
Oh no, the old they wrap your knuckles with the ruler type trouble or what?
I went to the Catholic school for 8 years. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got the good tender knuckles, right?
Yeah, yeah,
No, I mean I went to public school. I'm a New Bedford kid at South End.
yeah.
So I mean I went to public schools and what I would do is like my grandparents weren't strict but really they had high standards. So I was never a kid who was going to get in trouble. That just my grandmother was fond of saying, yeah, don't get into mischief. That was her thing. Don't get into mischief. And
Yeah.
so I was never a kid who was going to get into trouble. I'm pretty much an A student. But what I would do for extra credit, I would finish my math assignment or my letters, my cursive letters, and I'd flip the
Yeah.
paper over and I would draw Iron Man or whoever on the back or the Hulk on the back. And the teachers would give me extra credit. So I don't know if how much intellectual prowess I had, but I definitely had the ability to use my art. Excuse me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, along the way, where the encouragement, obviously, within the home. I mean, obviously, your grandparents didn't dissuade you, but
No.
anybody else within the family that encouraged you?
The principal one was my grandmother. Yeah, she was the one who really
Oh,
encouraged. Yeah, yeah, she was the principal one. I actually
the
I spent a
principal
great deal
was
of
your
time.
grandmother. What was her
No,
name?
no, no, no. Yeah, my grandmother, Joanna Andrade. She was the. There you go, Andrade. She
Oh,
was the one who really encouraged me. She was never. She was a principal motivation, not the principal of the school.
oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, she's
Because
constant
I
encouragement.
thought, okay,
Yeah,
all right.
constant encouragement through her. I mean, and I think anyone who is, it's been my observation that anyone who is successful at art has that person who's kind of like their benefactor in a way in their youth,
Yeah,
and I got
yeah.
that in her. She, bought the art supplies, fueled my inspiration for the comic books, and and really kind of fostered that.
Yeah, your enabler.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
basically my enabler.
Yeah. Now,
She was great for that.
outside of the home, who were the the people who gave you the hand up, the guidance, that kind of thing?
You mean more of like a traditional thing, like an art school or an art class, anything
Either the
that of the like?
teachers, I remember Maureen Kennedy. She was the junior high school art teacher. I moved from the South then in New Bedford. The last place we lived in New Bedford on Mott Street, and
Oh
I
my, I
moved.
used to live on Mott.
Get out! What
Yeah,
up?
absolutely. 19, I think it was.
Oh my
19.
God! You were like a couple of doors down. It was like it was 12 Mott.
Wow, we were
So
right. We
below
might have been
Cleveland.
neighbors.
You were below Cleveland.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
right down
yeah,
by where the factory was.
yeah. With
Yeah,
the capacitor place,
yeah,
Cornell Dublier.
yeah. That's right. As a matter of fact, my grandmother worked there like since the war. She worked there and then retired in the late '80s.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah, I watched them build the hurricane dike from my back porch when I was
Wow,
living there.
that's
Yeah.
amazing.
But Maureen Kennedy, she was the art teacher at what was the Elmer M. Pool School. We were the last graduating junior high school class from that institution, and later it went on to they went into a middle school program. But she was an incredible inspiration, and then when I went to New Bedford High School, it was Francisco Raposa, and he was a former Swain instructor. The guy was an
Hmm.
incredible watercolorist, traditionalist, but incredible, very deft at everything that he did. So that kind of thing that you can remember, anybody who inspired you that way, then they don't necessarily have to be art teachers, you know?
Well, I mean, along that same vein,
Mhm.
I really didn't get a lot of traditional art training until high school. I'm New Bedford Voc Tech alumni. So,
Mhm.
so once I was, once I got into New Bedford Voc, I mean, clearly, obviously, New Bedford Vocational School is literally about the vocation of, at least in my field, the vocation of visual design.
Mhm.
It was called commercial art at the time, so that's why I
Yeah.
refer to myself as a commercial artist. And the
Yeah.
two primary focuses there were there was the main one was Jim Gonzaga, rest in peace. He
Yes.
was a sign painter. I don't know if you're familiar with Jim.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, he was a major league mentor for me at the time, and he wasn't even teaching he was teaching the related class, the class that went on during the academic period
Hmm.
over at Voc at the academic cycle. So it was Jim, major influence, and then Fred Thompson was our art teacher at the time, commercial art teacher, and then he resigned or retired for my senior year, and then I had Sandra Santos. Do you know Sandra Santos?
No.
Yeah.
No. That name's not ringing a bell.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
But she,
oh,
yeah,
when
but
you
so
were there,
she taught there. I'm
where,
sorry.
where you weren't on Hillman Street, were you, or are you up at the new campus off of Ashley Boulevard?
Yeah, no, I was on the new. Well, at the time, I think it had been open for maybe about a decade by the time I went there.
Oh, okay. All
I'm
right.
I'm graduating class of '88, so I
Oh,
think
all right.
I want to say yeah. So so it had been up and running by the time I arrived. By the time our group arrived,
Right. Because I couldn't remember when they
and it
switched
was
over.
yeah, no, so clearly, yeah, Jim Gonzaga major influence because of the sign painting aspect of it. Yeah.
Now, the sign painting aspect of it too. There's this incredible importance of line, and I know one of the things I've been hunting for the longest time is an old speedball book, speedball pens, because that's what the
Yeah.
graphic arts or the graphic artists, the cartoonists. I mean, that's what they called them back then. That's what the cartoonists use, because if that was one of the things that always, strange as I am, it wasn't a storyline, it wasn't Superman, it wasn't Batman, it was the line, how a line could
Mm.
space. You've got that ribbon of line that just is, absolutely incredible. And for the longest time, I did have an old copy, a Speedball manual, I think it was called, and it was some flimsy, almost like flimsy paper or newsprint. It wasn't a high production value print job,
Hmm.
but just to see what those guys, the same guys who did the well, you know, Monopoly, those little cards, those cartoon characters, those things to me were always phenomenally mesmerizing. I don't know why.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's something about that contour line. There's something about being able to create depth and volume using line.
Mhm.
And in particular, like, you know, obviously you went through a little bit of a deep dive Google search of my images, and you
Yeah.
notice like a lot of my art has a line that contains the color. You
Mhm.
know, that should I say it serves as like the skeletal structure for the color. And that again, that is to me, you know, I mean, obviously I grew up on cartoons and comic
Mhm.
books just like everyone else, you know, all that pop culture stuff. But when I came up, it was Hanna-Barbera with that really
Yes.
thick contour line, that Scooby-Doo, that, you know, that line, and that really intrigued me as well. The ability to capture depth with the thickness and thinness of a line. So that, yeah, I think I inadvertently sort of absorbed all those influences, and it became part of my style.
There was a guy I went to school with in Immaculate Conception because before we moved to Mott Street, we lived on Earl Street in the North End. So I went to the Immaculate Conception school there, and his name was George Cardoza, and I think about him often. He learned to draw by sitting in front of a television set and drawing the characters that he would see on the TV and all the famous shows of the day. And for I think we're talking fourth, fifth grade, they were, you know, they were pretty well handled. And I said,
Right.
George, I mean, the things are moving. And he said, yeah, they are. He says, and if I can learn how to anticipate what they're going to do next. So he was even, like, let's see, how old were we back then? 10, 11, 12, something like that. He had this thing, and I always wondered about where he went on to, you know. And speaking of which, so from Greater New Bedford Regional Vocational Technical High School.
There you go. Get it
Okay.
all in there. Yep.
Yeah, you have enough room on an application to put that down, right?
Yep.
Where did you go to next? Where did things take you?
Right. As I mentioned earlier, I graduated in '88.
Mhm.
And because I had this sort of sign painting background, I went to a tiny art school called Butera School of Art in Boston. Butera.
I think I've actually heard of it.
Butera.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Because the school, I think, at no point had more than a couple hundred students in the. It was like a brownstone. Not, yeah, I say it was because they're no longer up and running. But the
Mhm.
brownstone, literally on Beacon Street in Boston, just off of Public Gardens, like literally right down the street from the Public Gardens.
Mhm.
And what an environment to go to school. I mean, essentially, I was recruited out of high school because, you know, again, because of the sign painting background that I was influenced by Jim Gonzaga.
Yeah.
I would render letter forms and typography, and I would integrate illustrations in with that. So I had this. So I kind of developed a style that was sort of like really animated type, for lack of a better way to describe it. And so then obviously, you know, we mentioned using contour line. I mean, a lot of that type is exactly that. It's contour lines.
I
And
mean,
so yeah, so they identified me as being somebody who would probably be a good sign painting student, and that's what I did. I went to school to go Butera School of Art for sign painting.
wow. I always, using a Finch brush or a Badger brush, and how, you get a charge in that brush, and how they can lay down, know how to, the first point of contact, and how to, the pressure on the hand. There's an enormous amount of tactility in that. So you were well prepared, obviously, going into what you're doing now.
Yeah, it was really interesting that the brush technique. It's literally when you go to that Butera School of Art, the entire first, I would say, 2 or 3 months is literally us with an easel and so, sheets of paper and literally just rendering lines with
Really?
the brush. It's that vertical lines, horizontal lines, circles, curves. We don't even start rendering letters for like the first month or so. And
Did
so
you
it's literally to acquire that muscle memory, that dexterity with the brush. The
the
first couple of
fine
months, it's
fine motor skill? Did you need a maul? Did you use a maul stick as well?
yep. They had the maul stick was also part of it. But that
Yeah.
again, that was advanced. After
That was
spending a month and a
advanced.
half, Yeah. Well, after spending a month and a half, like, just rendering lines and circles, I
Yeah.
mean, and then basic letter forms and then script type and stuff like that. The mall really, again, it was really just you'd expect, just to allow you to not, rub your arm or forearm on the live wet paint.
Yeah.
That's really all it was for us. I didn't use it as because some people, it was kind of considered a crutch at the time to use a mall to render all of your letters. It was kind of like there was almost a bit of a stigma to use a mall, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it
Wow.
was only almost like if you shoot pool and they have that bridge,
The bridge, yeah. That was my
yeah,
thought,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's what it was kind of used for. If you had an area where you really couldn't reach it without accidentally dipping into the wet paint.
Now, where did Butera lead you to?
Well, the thing about Butera, which is interesting, is like, again, I did the sign painting course, 2-year course, and in the second year, freshman, senior, the senior year, the administration, one of the folks in the administration of the school identified kind of, because I would give everything an illustrative take. I would add, if it was a piece that required a dragon, I would draw a dragon. And they started to realize, like, well, this guy could probably do our commercial arts section, because they had an entire other half of the school that was not just sign painting, it was commercial art.
Yeah.
And so I actually was given a scholarship to free scholarship to take 2 additional years of commercial art after I graduated from the 2-year sign painting program. And so I took advantage of that. I mean, free school, come on.
Yeah.
And it shaped me. It actually, it kind of reoriented my brain towards, drawing nothing but letter forms and attaching illustration to it, to the exact opposite, creating, illustrations that may have lettering that accompanies it. It reoriented my brain, and it switched me into that sort of like, again, that sort of custom sign painting guy, airbrush sign paint, all that, into an advertising, marketing, product design, character design guy. It literally reoriented my brain. It's like the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wow. I remember when I was younger. Well, I had the pleasure of meeting 2 gentlemen. One was his name is Milt Healy. Don't know how well he's doing. I used to see him a lot when I'd go food shopping in Fairhaven, and he was an old-time illustrator. I mean, the old school guys. These guys would create their own slug cuts. I mean, he'd tell me, they worked for retailers back then for newspaper ads, and they would come with a big carton of shoes and drop it on their desk, and they would sit there and render with a speedball pen illustrate shoes all day long, because they were going in for the ads, for like Steiger Dungeon and a bunch of the other way old places that don't exist anymore in downtown.
Tom McCann. Tom McCann and all that.
Yeah, and Tom McCann, exactly.
Yep.
And there was another gentleman, and the reason why he stood out is because he's the only gentleman of color that I remember in the advertising business. But he ran the department, and I believe it was for Mars Bargain Land, because Mars Bargain Land used to have their own production department, because they used to put out the circulars all the time for that location, and I think they probably had 1 or 2 more. His name was Tom McCoy. And again, you'd walk in there, and it'd be these old guys. Some of them, believe it or not, with their tie and shirt and tie, and they'd all be there illustrating all day long with the visors, with the lamps on glass. It was amazing that commercial art back then was really a production kind of a job. There was not too many heroes, not too much glory in that business back then.
No, yeah, and it's pretty funny that, I mean, when I graduated from Butera, advertising was kind of like the only way to go, the only path for someone who had any kind of skill as an illustrator. In other words, someone leaving art school, there were still jobs available as a person who could, like, you could work for an advertising agency as the storyboard guy or the comp artist.
Yeah.
Like, those jobs existed when I graduated art school. So, and to be honest with you, like, I was perfectly happy. I would have been perfectly happy just doing that, like being that guy with the visor and the lamp and the whole thing, like, because I mean, I was getting to draw and draw a lot, and so, Like literally, so when I graduated art school, I mean, my very first job was, you ever heard of Hill Holiday Advertising
Yes,
out of Boston?
I spoke with Ron Reagan. I don't know if he was there when you were there.
Ron Reagan. I
Ron
remember that.
Reagan
I wouldn't
was the
remember
art.
that name.
Yeah, he was the art. It was back. Well, it was by then. It was Hill Holiday Counters and Cosmopolis,
Yes.
and
Yep.
he was the art director. And I remember, with my portfolio, trying to get in and out of the
Uh-huh.
trolleys, doors closing on it, and all that stuff. And he, cold calling, and he was a really great guy. And he said, "Sure, I give everybody a break, but you have to make me a promise. Everybody has to promise the same thing to me." And I was like, I'm thinking to myself, "What's this?" He said, "Look, when you get to be where I am now, when somebody knocks on your door, I want you to do for them what I'm doing for you right now."
Right, right.
So he looked at my portfolio, and then he got really aggravated, and he threw it all back in my portfolio. And I'm like, it's no good. He's like, no, it's great, it's fine. He says, you can duplicate anything. You can make a pastiche of anything. He says, but I have no idea how the hell you think. Why the hell don't the universities and the colleges teach you, okay, concepts? I want concepts. I want to see a ratty old notebook with sketches. That's what I want to see.
Right. Yeah. It's funny how I think that mindset of trying to identify the creative thinkers is
Yeah,
so much more valuable than the renderers. And I mean
yeah,
no disrespect to someone who has that acuity to be able to see something and replicate it. That's a beautiful
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
I'm blessed to be able to do that to a certain degree.
yeah,
But the ability to generate an image, I mean, to see something, a quote or a paragraph or a sentence or even one word, and to
mm-hmm,
create something from scratch is a
yeah,
much more valuable trait to have in that field, in that creative and that commercial art field. That's
yeah.
one thing. I've been very, very fortunate to have that ability to generate imagery. That's hugely important.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a short interview, but it really shaped a lot of things. Because, like he said, why do they insist on having you do album covers and book jackets? He said,
Ah,
I've known guys who've been in this business for 30 years. They've never ever done an album cover or a book jacket. He says, if you get one, God bless you, you know?
you're right.
But
Yeah,
but
right.
he was that kind of nuts and bolts kind of guy. So how long did you stay there at Hill Holiday?
Yeah, I
Because
was
that
at
was
Hill
like a
Holiday.
ripping place at one time, right?
Yeah, no, I think it was at that point the number one agency in town. You're talking the early '90s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was there from '92 to '98, so I'd spent 6 years there. And I came in as a stat room. Do you remember stat room, like a
I
stat
remember stat
camera? And
rooms. I can still
yep,
the old ones with the cranks, and
yep,
if you're lucky, you had the motor drive ones, but the crank ones, and you could hear the bands like slapping.
yep, yeah.
You
That
always
was my very
smell
first
like
job.
onions in there, and you knew there were rats or roaches in there somewhere, but you couldn't see
Yeah, I know it's
them.
crazy, but but that I mean, listen, I like a lot of young aspiring artists, even to this day. I would have taken any job just to get my foot in the door. And literally, when that agency, literally the number one agency in town, said, "Well, we don't have an illustration job for you, but we have a stat camera guy job," I was like, "Shoot, I'll take that." And so I got the stat camera job. I showed up there the first day, ready to go into the dock room, and then Mark Alexander, who was the studio manager at the time at Hill Holiday, he was like, "No, we made a position for you. You're gonna be the illustrator." So I never spent one day in the stat room.
Uh,
They created a junior illustrator job for me, and I'm really blessed to have that opportunity right out of the gate. Right out of school, I got a job in
well,
the number one art agency. Yeah, very
that's
fortunate.
lucky. And so okay, so we're working our way through your CV, your resume, and from Hill Holiday, what did that lead to? You there?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I lost you there for a bit. It got a little
Oh yeah,
glitchy.
yeah. From Hill Holiday, like I said, I know we're going down your
Yeah,
CV, your
yeah, we're
resume.
going down memory
Yeah.
lane.
Because it's important because sometimes it triggers off things you haven't thought of
Sure.
so from there, where did life lead you?
Well, here's a funny thing about working at Hill Holiday. I mean, again, junior illustrator position. I draw anything you put across my desk, and in my free time, I was drawing, comic book cover related covers, and I was doing a lot of, sort of just stuff for fun. Album covers. Ironically enough, I used to do a lot of like hardcore band, not a lot, but a few hardcore band and heavy metal band covers. Skulls, crossbones,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that kind
yeah.
of stuff. Warriors and things like that. And what was happening was, as you well know, at an ad agency, they're always pitching for new clients. And when they would, there was myself and the senior illustrator, Steve Lewis. So him and I formed like the illustration team at Hill Holiday at the time. And the reality is, when you have a big pitch for a new client, there's just too much illustration that needs to be done in order to generate for this pitch. Mm-hmm. So they would bring in freelancers, and so I got to meet a lot of the the local talent for freelancers who were doing like storyboard illustration and comp illustration, mm-hmm. and incredible work. And they would come in and we'd do this big pitch and we'd work overnight and we'd eat pizza and we'd have a good time, and then they would go home. and I know at the time they were probably making, in terms of what they were charging, probably 2 to 3 times what I was making for a salary
as freelance,
as freelancers. And so the light bulb went off. This is like probably talking like late or mid 1998, and mm-hmm. I was like, you know what, I could do that. I mean, they're super talented people. They have experience. They have a client list. All it takes is for me to build that aspect of it. The drawing part of it, I was confident I had, but just building the client base. So literally, I just went out on my own. I started reaching out to artist reps in New York. My first rep was this company called Warshaw Blumenthal. They represent storyboard artists and comp artists out of New York City. And I reached out to them. I sent my, I think at the time, the internet was up and running. So at the time, I think I emailed them off some samples. And mm-hmm. I got work while I was still at Hill Holiday. I got some freelance work. And then I knew, all right, so if I can do this, then I can leave. So I just left. I put in my resignation, my 30 days, and I started freelancing from November of 1998 till current.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. Actually, my first job, like my first freelance job, like in-house for a Boston agency was an agency called, Bronner Humphrey Schlossberg, I think it was called at the time. It is now Digitas out of Boston. And that was like traditional, like you described earlier, with the portfolio, the giant portfolio on the T. Bumping
elevators. People wouldn't in, and you couldn't get the portfolio in, enough.
Absolutely, But here's the thing, though. At that point, I had, I had been working for 6 years, so I had like professional work. I had been doing illustration work for, at Hill Holiday. So, I'm very, very fortunate. I had the kind of material that another agency would be looking for, and so they brought me in. So I was doing a lot of sort of like in-house freelance jobs. I would come in and on an assignment or a pitch, and I do exactly like those folks I was referencing earlier. I'd come in like a gunslinger in the Wild West. I clear all the bandits out, and then get on my horse and move on to the next town. And that was kind of my life for many years.
Well, actually, that was, if I remember right, too, it'd be like, okay, we just got the battery account. You hired all these people. Oh, we just lost the battery account. You fire all those people. Oh, we just got that car account. So that was, I remember when I got hired at a place in Kramer Trowbridge FSR in Providence. And I got hired on a Friday. I was told to, on a Wednesday, I was told to report to work the following Monday. I go into the building and I start seeing this yellow ledger paper taped over all the signage. And I'm like, what the hell's this? And then I go look for the receptionist that I had schmoozed to get my way in the door to get the interview, to get the job. And it's not her. And I'm looking and the woman says, well, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I'm here. I'm reporting for work. She said, there is no work. I said, what? Who hired you? I said, Dan Shepard. Dan doesn't work here anymore. I said, this is Kramer Trowbridge. She said, yeah, there was like a bloodbath over the weekend. It's a whole different agency now.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's just, but that was that business. And I think it's funny if you, again, if you're able to kind of see that and able to, I was able to kind of forge my own niche just by simply seeing that, I saw that even at Hill Holiday. I remember the first year I was there, they had, Infinity, the Nissan's offshoot, the Infinity brand, and then they lost that account. And I remember the dread that washed over the whole agency, like who's getting fired, who's getting laid off, and I remember thinking to myself, I just started this career and I'm already right, first in, first out, right? Generally, and I was like, I'm going to be out in the street already. I just started this career, and I realized after a period of time of ups and downs, it's like if you freelance and you're able to maintain a client base, you're never out of the game.
You're never
always,
overhead.
yeah, that's
You're a
right. Yeah,
line
that too.
item.
Yeah, seriously, yeah. And the reality is, I don't think most people understand, artists or otherwise, the economics of how that works. Oftentimes, an agency, when they're billing for creative, they can just work your fee into the budget. So it's there are budgets set and there's X amount for creative. If you peel off a little bit of money for the freelance guy to come in, then what's the problem? It's all part of the budget.
Everybody's happy, right?
Yeah, everybody's happy.
What have been some of your greatest accomplishments in your career to date? I mean, I'm just thinking about a guy I went to school with, Leon Rosenblatt, and we were talking about album covers. And yet, you know what? Leon is the only guy that I know that actually did an album cover and as an illustrator, and it was a classic. It was the Styx album with Merlin holding out the orb. That was Leon,
Right.
and he worked for National Lampoon and all these other things. And that was like one of his high points. What was some of yours?
It's funny. I don't think. I mean, if I look at the era of where we were in that sort of like early to mid '90s, or approaching into the late '90s, where I was working inside the ad agency and just starting as a freelance storyboard artist and comp artist. I mean, obviously, working for all these agencies, I did a number of art for TV commercials that ran during the Super Bowl and that ran during during the NBA Finals. And so I got to work on a lot of art that eventually wound up as TV commercials. Now, obviously, there's no notoriety at all to that, as you well know.
Being a storyboard guy.
Yeah. You're anonymous. You're just you're a cog in the wheel. There's no one gonna, when the what was the Hatch Awards? They used to have the Hatch Awards.
Yeah.
Every year, and every year I would be in the mix. Like I'd be the 15th name on that, because they do credit everyone, believe it or not, on those.
Yeah.
So I mean, but that's nothing anyone would deem relevant. It wasn't until I got I'm still in advertising, but I got into the toy and game industry. That's when things started changing. Where people started recognizing, like I would do comic book conventions. People would say, "Oh, you're the guy who does the art for X, Y, and Z." So that's the next chapter in the story. Is like literally as soon as I went freelance, this couple of years, I got work at which is kind of a an interesting story. And in that time frame, I actually taught at Butera School of Art for a period of time. So from the time I went freelance in '98 to about 2000 and 2001, I actually taught at my alma mater, my art school, my college level art school.
Yeah.
And so that's where I got my first. Through that experience, I made connections with some of my students. Actually, one in particular, Chris Ford. He graduated from art school. I want to say his graduating class was 2000, I believe. And he got a job at Hasbro at the games division out in East Longmeadow, back when they had it way out in East Longmeadow, Mass. And of course, being his teacher, he was like, I know Roger could do this assignment. So he brought me in, shared me with some of his other, some of his compatriots over there.
Yeah.
In particular, Bill Concannon. And my very first thing that I ever did was Clue. There was a rebrand of Clue in the early 2000s, and they brought me in to do art for the box cover, for the game board, for the little pieces themselves. They used to be these little pawns, and then now they're sculpted pieces. So obviously anything that needs to be sculpted needs to be rendered out first, drawn out first. And so that was my very first foothold job at Hasbro. I worked on the redesign of Clue back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, and then I went on from there. Like any, that's one thing about this industry that I don't know if a lot of folks understand as well. When you work in sort of licensing and marketing and advertising, like if you do a good job for one art director or creative director, as we mentioned, there's a volatility in that industry. So oftentimes that art director or creative director will move to another agency or be shifted to another brand. Another division as well. Yeah. And so what happens is if you do good work for them, they bring you in. And then now, again, speaking of virus, it gets viral. It's like, that guy, he does really good art on XYZ. He's got creative ideas. you can use him for this assignment.
Right.
And that's what actually started happening at Hasbro. It really started to kind of bounce. I started to bounce around over there.
Yeah. Did you ever do it for CBS Sports when you were doing your the storyboards?
I'm sorry, one more time?
Did you ever do anything for CBS Sports when you were at
CBS,
CBS, CBS Sports in New York? Yeah.
I don't recall ever doing anything for CBS Sports. I mean, obviously, I've done a lot of sports-related stuff, mostly through like apparel brands, like like a hat, Nike or Puma or stuff like that. I've done.
Just asking. A friend of mine was the senior VP of promotions for there, and he was an incredible ad person himself. And it's amazing because it's a small family. It's a microcosm of people, and even though these people are scattered all over the country, it's amazing who knows. It's the 6 degrees of separation kind of thing in advertising. Still holds true. So you're currently where now? Because we got to be wrapping this up pretty soon.
Sure. All right. So I mean, well, I mean, again, I continue to freelance. Have been now, I guess, since the late '90s, and so where am I at now? Like, you mean in terms of like my physical location?
Well, no. Where your head is at, where your art is at. Career. Yeah.
Well, I mean, well, you had mentioned earlier, just to throw this in there in terms of a more identifiable mark that people would recognize me for. There was a product at Hasbro in that same time frame, that early 2000s, and it was called Galactic Heroes. It was for Star Wars. It was a Star Wars product. It was these little sort of like shrunken down versions of Star Wars characters.
My grandson had a bunch of those.
There you go. So that product right there is essentially defined my style. It's kind of like my, it's like if I was a band, I'd have to play that hit song every time I was in concert. It's my, Hey Jude or Freebird. I have to play it every. I have to play it every concert.
As much as yeah.
No, in the reality is I don't hate it. That's the thing about it. It's like oftentimes I've been rendering that style. That sort of squat down. It's a kind of a version of Japanese chibi, anime chibi style, that sort of squat figures. And I've been rendering those characters, that Galactic Heroes. Then it went on to be Marvel Superhero Squad. And then I did some Transformers ones in that style, Robot Heroes, and so on and so on. And so I've done them for Pixar and I've done them for, you name it. Every character's gotten that treatment over the years. And so that is literally my identifier. And so that brings me to like what's going on nowadays. It's like what I've done is, obviously I've done a ton of work for a variety of different companies, but recently I started doing my own YouTube channel, and it's called Sketchy Go Ichi. And what it is like my way of giving back. And so what I do is I have a channel that essentially is in its purest form is a how-to. Oftentimes I'll put videos up where it's just sort of like contemplative, me discussing like the philosophy of art and how to get better at it and things of that nature. And I think that's something I wish I had as an aspiring artist or someone who wants to really break into becoming a professional. And so I've got a whole series of videos on there that I'm doing. And that to me is like where the reward comes in doing art, because it allows me to both draw, talk about art, and share it with people who hopefully get something out of it. So that's Sketchy Go Ichi on YouTube. That is like my main focus right now. Right. And and very, again, I'm going to say it again, I've said it several times, fortunate and blessed that I am still very, very busy doing freelance toy and game art, video game stuff now, toy stuff obviously for Hasbro, Mattel, you name it, all of those guys. And then in addition, doing the traditional storyboards and comps. I still do all that stuff as well. But the YouTube channel is the key. That's the one, like, if nothing else, if I could get like become so big doing being someone who actually gives back, and it's not monetized. I'm not looking to make any money off of it. It's fun. And I think the people who have responded well to it, they've all said that, yes, that's a great video because I get to learn a little something about the process of being an artist and getting better at it.
Yeah. Process. That's an important word. Hey, I always tell everybody that these podcasts are not a one and done. We've got so much to cover. We ran out of time so fast. Just way more. And the Sketchy Go Ichi might be another great podcast in by itself, where you can talk about the whole concept of that. And you and I had discussed prior to doing this podcast about what this is all about. This is all about people, other artists, non-artists, being able to hear an artist speak their mind, relate their experiences, their background, so on and so forth, because it's going to be of value to somebody. It's going to be of value to somebody now, and it's definitely going to be of value to somebody in the future. And with that being said, what is the one thing that you would like to be remembered for?
You mean in terms of one piece of art, or just one sort of take on life?
Yeah, one take on life, one piece of art, one incidence, whatever. Yeah.
Well, the one thing I to me is the most important and most essential thing, maybe perhaps in life, is having a sense of perspective. And I don't mean physical, like 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspective. I mean like actual perspective on things. And the thing that I kind of live by is like, I'm never upset or overly put out by anything that I cannot control. There are certain aspects of life that you literally are, you don't have the steering wheel for. So if that's the case, why be upset about it? Why lock yourself away? Why curl up into a ball? Why put yourself into a corner if you have no control over it?
Yeah.
And so if you master what you can control, there's a level of peacefulness that comes from that, I found in life. That goes for the art as well. I mean, a lot of people are like, well, how do you make money doing this? Or how do you break in? Or how do you do that? You cannot control that. But what you can control is like your level of professionalism, your ability to meet deadlines, your level of creativity, how much energy you want to put into practice. Like all these things you can control. So there's no reason to be upset by something that you cannot. So that's the thing. Yeah, that's the tough thing. But but that's essentially how I live my life, and it works.
Yeah. I was kind of not. I was laughing not at you, but at myself, because I really need that kind.
At me. It's okay.
No, I need it because the problems I've been having with technical problems with internet and stuff like that, and it gets to a point where you really want to slug something.
Yeah, that's right. And listen, frustration is okay, right? To be frustrated is natural. That's okay.
Yeah.
But to wallow in it and to not have the ability to push beyond it.
Oh no.
Yeah. That's the thing that I think a lot of people have. The woe is me, and why does that guy get a shot and I don't? And,
no.
My art is better than them, and why is their art on television and mine's not? Or why are they doing the album cover for Styx and I'm stuck at doing the local garage band? It's not, you can't control that.
Yeah.
All you can do is do the best you can. And then I find again, it's a matter of perspective. If you tend to be more positive in how you view yourself and your art, I think other people can pick up on that. The people who tend to be more negative about themselves and their art, just face it, who really wants to hang around with that person? Who wants to support
guts,
that?
right?
Yeah, exactly. You have to be overwhelmingly talented, undeniably so, that people want to work with a jerk. That's really how it works in life, and that's been my experience in the career. If you're just a good person and you're honest and upfront, and for the most part you are positive, people will are generally attracted to that type of personality.
Exactly. If they're normal.
If they're normal. Yeah, they're normal. Yeah, that's right. They don't have problems themselves.
We're talking about advertising at some points in our lives. It's like,
absolutely.
We'll just work. Yeah. Well, this wraps up another episode of the In Focus podcast. I'm your host, Ron Fortier, and today we've been speaking with Roger Andrews, illustrator, which is almost like your full name, Roger Andrews, illustrator.
There you go.
And thank you so much.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Honored to be on.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the South Coast Artist Index podcast. For more information, please visit theartistindex.com.